I'm Scott Slapin of the Slapin-Solomon Viola Duo, and I'm here today to talk to you about viola players playing the violin and violin players playing the viola. But first, I'm going to talk to you about other instruments, and then it will become clearer why. Somebody who plays a B-flat clarinet can easily play a clarinet in A or a clarinet in E-flat, though it requires some adjustments, because they're transposing instruments and the note that they see on the page always corresponds to the same fingering. Everything I just said is true about the trumpets in B-flat or in C or in D. It's true about saxophones. You get the idea. There are a lot of instruments that do this. It's odd that the viola and the violin do not read the same clef and that one of them is a transposing instrument. It didn't shuffle out that way, though it could have. Before the 1900s, alto clef was used for many, many different instruments. Today it's perceived as the clef of the viola, but I had scores from the early 1900s of Wagner operas printed by Breitkopf and Hertel that had the alto singers in alto clef. I had scores by Dvorak where the alto trombones were in alto clef. I had scores by Prokofiev where the English horn was written in alto clef. Today, none of these instruments are reading generally alto clef. They've all migrated to transposing treble clef instruments or bass clef instruments. That the viola stuck with alto clef is because of its range. But if you leave out the clef issue, historically, the viola and the violin were doubling instruments in the same way, certainly until the middle of the 20th century. It was viewed that way. Many schools did not offer degrees in viola playing. It was expected you would simply go to a conservatory and study the violin, and then if you preferred the sound of the viola or wanted to play the viola for whatever reason, then you would switch. And if you look at the biographies of most, not all, but I would go as far as to say the vast majority of well-known viola players, you will see that they played the violin for quite a long time before switching. Even today, when of course you can go get a degree at a conservatory in viola performance, even today the technical repertoire for viola still mainly comes from the violin. That is to say, we do Kreutzer etudes, we do Rode etudes, we do some Paganini caprices, we use Sevcik and Schradek. These are all simply transposed down a fifth from the violin repertoire. Also compounding this is before 1900, the viola wasn't seen that widely as a solo instrument. So a lot of the music that we want to get from before 1900, we end up transposing down a fifth from the violin. And from other instruments too, but we take a lot from the violin because it's the closest instrument to the viola, and it requires, in most cases, no arranging to put it on a viola. Whereas to take even cello music, there's the issue where it's up an octave and it doesn't fit into the chords the same way on the piano. So, I mean, a lot of that can work, but there are more alterations that are required. I wouldn't want, though, that people take away from this video that the technique for the violin and the viola is exactly the same. I think the general techniques are the same, but there are many nuances that differ between the two instruments and that would take a long time to adjust to if you've not played one of those instruments before, but you've played the other. Some of them include how the kinds of vibrato you're going to use, even just how straight up and down your fingers are. I think on both instruments, for clarity in a fast passage, you want them to be more straight up and down with a curved pinky. But certainly, and on both instruments, when it's more lyrical, you can have flatter fingers. But on the viola, how flat they can be probably goes farther than on the violin. One thing people talk about quite a bit, and there are many videos out there for violinists who want to pick up the viola. One thing people talk about is that you have to use more bow pressure on the viola. And I suppose that's scientifically true, but I don't think that's especially useful advice, and I'll tell you why. First of all, a viola bow weighs more than a violin bow, the average viola bow. So that somewhat compensates for that. And second of all, the viola is actually more vulnerable to too much pressure. That is to say, you don't want to be producing sounds through a lot of pressure. You can get away with that a little bit more on a violin because it's a little bit more of a resonant instrument. The viola you sort of have to coax the sound out of. So the idea of adding pressure is probably not a great way to go about it. But the point is, there are many, even though the broad techniques are the same, there are many different nuances that exist and that you would need time to get used to. And of course, much of the repertoire is quite different. It is well known that many and maybe most violin soloists have performed from time to time on the viola. But it's less known that viola players also play from time to time on the violin. And I think it's beneficial for both things to happen. The reason the viola uses the series of Kreutzer and Rode etudes and Paganini caprices is because left-hand technique has been so developed on the violin that why would you want to reinvent the wheel? It's great to use that, to take what's been learned from the violin world and use it on the viola. And I think by practicing on a smaller violin, you can gain some insights. It's even more, it's performing microsurgery. And many violin teachers require their students to take a semester of viola, even if they don't have any interest in playing it. And the reason is often is they believe that it will improve their sound, their bow arms, because the viola is a little touchier. As I say, it's not as forgiving as the violin. It doesn't ring as easily. So it's going to increase the precision in your bow arm. So both, even if you believe in only playing the viola or if you believe in only playing the violin, you're going to be better on those instruments for having spent a decent amount of time on the other.